Long before the dawn of recorded history, on the vast and mysterious continent of Africa, wild animals roamed, even as they do today. As they do now in Africa, the vultures gathered long ago at dawn for a savage, grisly feast. And out of the darkness rushed a strange creature spurred by hunger to drive the vultures away. So, by stealing meat far in the prehistoric past, this creature may have won survival for himself and for his descendants, who will call themselves man. Seeking man's story in the relics of ancient times, his most recent history is clearly written. For more than 1,000 years, he flourished in Rome and the city-states of ancient Greece. In the valley of the Nile, the Egyptians left a hieroglyphic history reaching back 5,000 years. But as they become more ancient, the traces of man are fewer and more cryptic, and his recorded history finally dwindles until there is only the work of a nameless human artist who worked on the walls of a cave 28,000 years ago. Before this, there is no recorded history of man. Somehow, somewhere, he must have lived and developed to become what we are today. But this story is buried in the infinite receding shadows of time. Today, after hundreds of thousands of years have passed, a scientist seeks to prove that man was born in Africa. In search of man's earliest ancestors, Dr. Leakey has spent his lifetime roaming a wild and desolate land. The scale of his quest defies the imagination. It is as if on a great beach he was searching for a single grain of sand. Leakey was born in 1903 in a mud-walled hut deep in the highlands of Kenya. Growing up, Leakey combines a taste for the outdoors and adventure with the burning curiosity of a born scientist. He reads of strange discoveries made in France and Germany beginning in the 1800s. At first by accident, later by design, archaeologists are unearthing incredibly ancient evidence of man. In several places, fossil bones are found dating back more than 50,000 years. As reconstructed, these bones reveal a bizarre creature with huge jutting brow ridges and a receding chin. He is called Neanderthal man. Despite his fearsome, brutal features, scientists conclude that this squat, shaggy caveman is a human predecessor. He lived and fought for survival long before the dawn of recorded history. The next great discoveries are made in the Far East, first in Java, later in China near Peking. Here, scientists reconstruct bones of a creature with distinctly human features who lived 500,000 years ago. They call him Paranthropus, literally the ape man. So the conviction is born that Asia is the cradle of man, the only place worth looking for still more ancient human remains. But Louis Leakey, as an archaeology student at Cambridge University in the 20s, startles his professors with a scientific heresy. He says, "I am convinced that Africa, not Asia, is the cradle of mankind." Leakey returns to Africa after his graduation. In Kenya's capital city, Nairobi, he organizes his first expeditions in search of early man. In the parched African rubble, Leakey discovers definite traces of early man, stone tools and other artifacts. His critics remain unconvinced, but Leakey is now completely determined. At first alone, later with his wife and closest colleague, Mary, he will search on in Africa.
And so we set to work to try and find a place where the conditions would be right for the search we were going to make. It was a long and arduous task, made more difficult by the roads and the general conditions of that time. But we had to have a place where, at the relevant time, somewhere round about 1 million years ago or more, there had been water. Because without water, man didn't live, and the animals on which he fed would not be present. Secondly, we needed a place where that water was rich in minerals, because without that, any bones that were left behind would not have been preserved and fossilized for us to dig up years later. Thirdly, we needed a place where nature subsequently had cut through the rocks to expose for us the chapters of the Earth's history in which these relics were buried. Eventually, we found a place that fitted all these conditions, a place called Olduvai Gorge.
Olduvai Gorge has been called the Grand Canyon of evolution, for it is quite literally a deep slice into prehistoric time. Far in the dim past, natural forces laid down layer upon layer of rock and sediment, of volcanic ash and gravel, building slowly to the present land surface. Then, in more recent times, a raging river cut this spectacular gorge, exposing a geological record plunging 2 million years into the past.
Olduvai Gorge gives us one of the most remarkable stories of the past, the last chapter of the Earth's history, starting from the present day, right away back 2 million years. Here we're standing at the very top of the series, and up here where the grass is growing and the plants are growing represents written history, the time of the last 4,000 or 5,000 years, the time of the pyramids, the time of man developing to the present day. And here beneath it, in this 2 feet of this hard rock, we have the whole of the time that is recognized of man in America. The last 15,000 years are here.
Now Leakey starts down the gorge, beginning a walk backwards into time. An average of 6,000 years is traversed with each foot he descends. Leakey now has descended about 70 feet and roughly 500,000 years.
This is a site that Mary and I found and excavated way back in the past. It's the earliest known site of true hand-axe man. It corresponds in time, roughly, to when Java man and Pekin man were living, and until a few years ago, that was the oldest known man in the world. They lived, these men of ours, by the side of this stream that laid down these gravels that you see here. We know that because we find his hand axes here, tools that he made 500,000 years ago.
Leakey now descends into the crucial hunting ground. The rock beneath his feet is more than 500,000 years old.
And now I'm down at the bottom of the gorge. My feet are resting on the black lava which formed the old land surface on which these lake beds formed. And here behind me are the earliest part of the Olduvai series, deposits that were formed just nearly 2 million years ago. It was here that in 1931 we first found examples of simple tools like this, stone tools that go back to a very, very remote past in time. Who were the men who made these tools? We wanted the answer. Who were these men?
An excavation at Olduvai, where the process of digging a hole in the ground is raised to a fine and delicate art. To ensure against damaging vital specimens, the most critical digging is done not with picks and shovels, but with dental picks and toothbrushes, probing down just inches at a time. Everything taken from the excavation must be carefully examined. Conceivably, an entire skeleton of early man might be unearthed in tiny bits and pieces that the layman would dismiss as worthless rubble. During long days on her hands and knees, Mary Leakey inspects her harvest of rock and fossil bone. Days and weeks may pass without a single exciting find, but she has cultivated a stoic patience. Each fossil specimen is carefully labeled and charted, for back in the laboratory, a seemingly insignificant find could become vitally important. Not a fragment is lost or overlooked. Most common finds at Olduvai are fossil bones of animals. Collected over the years, these give a picture of the more than 150 different species of wildlife which roamed in Africa nearly 2 million years ago. Yet, for decades, not one intact human bone of this period is found. But still, Leakey is tantalized by oddly chipped pieces of stone, frequently unearthed in very ancient layers of the gorge. It looks like nothing at all, but to Leakey, this is an awesome relic, a tool that was made, used, and abandoned hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of years ago. The diggers return from the gorge, ending another tedious, exhausting day. In their open hut, by the light of lanterns, the Leakeys work on. They will use these hours to sort, classify, and discuss the finds from their latest dig. Finding a specimen is only the beginning. A still greater task lies in figuring out what it is and what it may mean. The presence of man is only suspected. None of his bones have been found. So it was for 30 years at Olduvai. The Leakeys worked on, alone and virtually ignored. Morning after morning, year after year, Olduvai's ancient secrets are still preserved. The Leakeys begin again, searching ground already searched before, following hunches which lead to nothing. And then the fateful day comes at last. A summer's day in 1959 that Leakey will remember all the rest of his life.
I was ill. I had a flu. I stayed in camp in our truck, and Mary went out alone. She spent the morning crawling up and down the cliffs of FLK-1 to see whether there was any further clue to be got. Around about 11, she was ready to pack up and come back. She did one more crawl up the cliff. She saw a small fragment of, first of all, what looked like human skull. She bent down with her brush and brushed, and as soon as she brushed on the scree, there were actually 2 human teeth. She abandoned everything, rushed back, and told me, I've got it, I found the man.
Recalls Leakey, we almost cried out of sheer joy. These pictures were made less than 24 hours after Mary caught the first glimpse of her great discovery. And now, you are witness, as Dr. Louis Leakey lifts from the soil of Africa the fragments of fossil bone that will give a remarkable new perspective on the origin of man. Dr. and Mary Leakey gloat like proud parents over their newfound fossils. In 19 days of painstaking excavation, they have gathered nearly 400 tiny pieces of bone at the place where Mary made her original find. Even before these are closely studied or assembled, one fact is clear to them. These are by far the oldest human remains ever found. From details of bone and tooth structure, the Leakeys can also tell that their prize was a male, about 18 years old at the time of his death. The news is out. Leakey's discovery startles many scientists and rouses spirited debate all over the world. The excitement of the Leakey's discovery reaches far, to San Francisco and the University of California at Berkeley. Here, a physicist and a geologist working together have perfected the potassium-argon dating process, a method for determining the age of rocks. Rocks found with Leakey's fossil bones are sent from Olduvai for analysis. Tests are run, an extraordinary process which translates chemical measurements into an index of antiquity. The result? Fantastic, all but unbelievable. Leakey's discovery is nearly 3 times older than any human traces previously found, dating back 1¾ million years. In Washington, D.C., at the Smithsonian Institution, another specialized project is underway. Assembled at long last, the Leakey's fossil fragments reveal a skull of strange form and dimensions. Leakey has called his find Zinjanthropus, or East Africa man. Now, with the concrete evidence of the skull, a master sculptor will recreate the face that once covered it, a face long lost in the distant past. So the face of Zinjanthropus is seen again on this earth, nearly 2 million years after his death at Olduvai Gorge. At Olduvai, scientists from around the world now come to visit Dr. Leakey and pay him honor. With financial aid from the National Geographic Society, the hillside where Zinjanthropus lay is excavated on a massive scale. More can be done in months than in all the years when the Leakeys worked with little outside help. It is a truism of science that discovery only leads to further mystery and new points of controversy. Some of Leakey's colleagues doubt that Zinjanthropus should be called a man. Although admitting that he has man-like features, they feel he is far too primitive a creature to have made the tools found near him. Privately, Leakey too begins to wonder. Digging goes on, seeking Olduvai's deeper secrets. And in 1960, an astonishing find is made. Another set of teeth, but very different from those of Zinjanthropus. These are much more like the teeth of modern man. Leakey realizes that he has found a second type of man-like creature whom he christens Homo habilis, Only a few parts of the skeleton are found, but this discovery has extraordinary implications. If not one, but two man-like creatures lived here at Olduvai, Leakey must try to figure out what became of them and how they relate to modern man. So a story emerges from this lonely valley, a story reconstructed after the passage of nearly 2 million years. Nearly 2 million years ago, we know that the climate at Olduvai was misty, warm, and humid. Clearly, where the gorge now lies, there was once a lake, and near its shores lived Leakey's first discovery, Zinjanthropus. Zinjanthropus was probably not the Olduvai tool maker, although he was much like man in many ways. By all evidence, he was not highly intelligent and probably quite timid, for surrounding him were many animals more powerful and aggressive. Giant pigs, as large as the present-day rhinoceros. The Dinotherium, monstrous cousin of the elephant. The lion, looking much as he does today. Over a great length of time, the climate changes at Olduvai. A long period of drought begins. As today in Africa, this is a severe test of all living creatures, a frantic battle for survival. One of the casualties is probably Zinjanthropus. His food supply dwindles. Easy prey for ravenous animals, he finally meets extinction. So passes a fascinating creature, in whom nature nearly, but not quite, created man. But Leakey's second discovery, Homo habilis, is also here. And probably he wins survival by competing with scavengers for precious shreds of meat. Homo habilis probably made Olduvai's tools, but he remains a mysterious figure, with only fragments of his skeleton yet discovered. Later, much later, still a third creature appears at Olduvai, Homo erectus. His remains and stone tools have been found in many other parts of the world. Massive, powerful, he was a hunter, killing for meat. Homo erectus would seem a direct ancestor of modern man. In time, he developed sophisticated tools and weapons. In northern climates, he even discovered fire. But Leakey suspects that he, too, was a dead end, doomed eventually to extinction. It is Homo habilis, Leakey believes, who survived by the development of his brain, the sharpness of his cunning, to spawn all the generations of man. Leakey's evidence, the incomplete but precious fragments of Homo habilis unearthed at Olduvai. He feels these indicate that a creature existed long before Homo erectus, who was already developing toward modern man.
Sometimes, when we look at the work of the last 40 years, we begin to wonder what we've really achieved, because there are so many gaps missing in this story. We've got a great many new finds made over the years at Olduvai and elsewhere. But nevertheless, the real emphasis has to be laid on the fact of our ignorance. There's so much to do, so many things to find, and every time a new find is made, it poses new problems where it answers earlier ones. It poses new questions, and it raises new objections from some of our colleagues.
Drawn by the prospect of fresh discoveries, the Leakeys search on. Says Dr. Leakey, "You may call our motive curiosity if you like, but it is a major curiosity. I want to know, who am I? What was it that made me what I am?"